What up, Acheron family? Good to see you, and welcome to another edition of the 24 Standards of Acheron. This is standard number 16, Never Stop Improving. There's an old story about two men in a logging competition. One was young, strong, and full of energy. The other was older, slower, and didn't look nearly as impressive. At sunrise, they both started cutting. The young man, just full of brute strength, attacked the tree with everything he had. Swing after swing after swing, no breaks, no wasted time. He was determined to outwork the older man. Every hour or so, he'd glance over his shoulder and notice something strange. He was like, the old man was sitting down. Dude gets back at it, looks over his shoulder. The old man was sitting down again. And again. And again, the young man smiled to himself. He's like, man, I got that fool. He's resting. I'm working. But at the end of the day, the young man's hands were so blistered, his back hurt, and he could barely lift the axe. Then they counted the wood. The old man had cut significantly more wood. The young man couldn't understand it. He's like, man, he's cheating. How could he cut more wood than me? So he walked over and said, man, dude, you're cheating, bro. How is that possible? Every time I looked over, you were sitting down. The old man looked at him and smiled and said, yes, every time I sat down, I was sharpening my saw. This story has always struck me because most people think that success comes from working harder. Sometimes it does, but eventually effort alone hits a wall. You can work longer, you can work later, you can grind harder, but if you're using a dull saw, all you're doing is wasting energy. Jim Rohn, my boy, used to say, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Think about that. Most people spend years working on their job. Very few spend years working on themselves. The best salespeople just don't sell more. They become masters of their craft. They become better communicators. They become better listeners. They become better negotiators. And it's usually not the stuff that they learn. Usually most people do the stuff that they learned in the first 90 days of doing whatever thing that they are learning, and they just do it over and over and over again. You don't get better at that. You got to stay continually learning and growing. The best technicians, they just don't turn more wrenches, they improve their knowledge. The best leaders don't just manage people, they improve their patience, their communication, God, that one's hard, and their decision making. They sharpen the saw. At Acheron, improvement isn't optional because if we're not getting better, we're getting worse. There's no neutral. The market is improving. Technology, other dealerships are improving. Customer expectations are improving. If we stay the same, we straight up fall behind. That means we have to be willing to hear feedback. We have to be willing to admit when something isn't working. We have to be willing to change a process, even if we have done it the same way for years. And most importantly, we got to stay teachable. Right? Give me a guy that's teachable and watch him do anything. Anything in this world is possible. The moment someone says, I already know that, growth stops. The moment someone believes they have nothing left to learn, they're already falling behind. I've seen this in my personal life. There are many seasons where I thought the answer was to simply work harder. More hours, more effort, more sacrifice. But some of the biggest breakthroughs came through when I stopped swinging the axe long enough to sharpen it. Learning a new skill, reading a new book, listening to a mentor, that's hard. Change a process, build a better system. These improvements paid me back far more than another hour of brute force. So the standard is simple. Never stop improving. Stay humble enough to learn. Stay hungry enough to grow. Stay coachable enough to change. because the people who win long term aren't always the smartest or the strongest. They're the ones who keep sharpening the saw. So here's my call to action. Before you leave today, identify one thing you can improve. One process, one habit, one skill. It can be small. It can be the way you answer the phone. One conversation, one weakness, and then make it better. Because success isn't built in giant leaps. It's built by sharpening the saw a little bit every single day. Thanks for listening, Acheron family. Peace.